The demolition crew's sledgehammer crashed into the concrete wall of Marcus Chen's backyard swimming pool at exactly 7:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, sending chunks of debris flying across his lawn like confetti at the world's loudest party. What Marcus didn't expect was for his neighbor Patricia Williamson, better known to the entire Maple Grove subdivision as Pool Karen, to come charging across his property line in her pink bathrobe and fuzzy slippers, screaming about property values and homeowner associations like her life depended on it. But let's back up 3 months to understand how Marcus, a mild-mannered software engineer who preferred debugging code to dealing with drama, ended up in this mess. It all started when Marcus inherited his late uncle's house on Elmwood Drive. The 1980s ranch-style home came with original wood paneling, harvest gold appliances, and a kidney-shaped pool that had seen better decades. The pool's concrete was cracking, the liner was more patched than original material, and the filtration system wheezed like a chain smoker climbing stairs. Marcus had gotten 3 estimates for repairs, and each contractor had delivered the same devastating news. It would cost more to fix the pool than to fill it in and start over. Marcus made his choice. The pool had to go. What he hadn't counted on was Patricia Williamson's obsession with maintaining the neighborhood's aquatic aesthetic. Patricia lived in the corner house with the perfectly manicured lawn, seasonal door wreaths, and a Ring doorbell that she monitored like a security guard. She had appointed herself the unofficial guardian of Maple Grove's property values, and apparently, Marcus' pool demolition was a direct assault on her mission. The trouble began the day Marcus pulled the permits. Patricia appeared at his front door within hours, clutching a manila folder thick with printed articles about pools increasing home values. She wore her Neighborhood Watch Captain t-shirt and the expression of someone who had just discovered a crime in progress. "You cannot be serious about removing that beautiful pool," Patricia declared, not bothering with pleasantries like hello or how are you. She pushed past Marcus into his living room, her folder papers rustling with righteous indignation. "Do you have any idea what this will do to our property values? That pool is a selling feature." Marcus had tried to be reasonable. He explained the structural issues, showed her the repair estimates, and pointed out that the pool hadn't been functional in 2 years. Patricia wasn't interested in facts. She was interested in control. "I've been living in this neighborhood for 15 years, she announced, spreading her research across his coffee table like a prosecutor presenting evidence. "I know what's best for our community. You're making a huge mistake, and I won't let you ruin our neighborhood's reputation." Over the following weeks, Patricia launched what she called her pool preservation campaign. She knocked on every door in the subdivision, started a Facebook group called Save Our Neighborhood Pools, and even created a petition that she waved at anyone who made the mistake of checking their mailbox when she was outside. Marcus ignored her. He had permits, he had contractors, and most importantly, he had the legal right to do whatever he wanted with his own property. What he didn't have was an understanding of just how far Patricia was willing to go to get her way. The morning of the demolition, as that first sledgehammer blow echoed across the neighborhood, Patricia's war was just beginning. Patricia Williamson didn't just march across Marcus's lawn that Tuesday morning. She planted herself directly between the demolition crew and the pool like a human barricade, her arms spread wide and her voice reaching decibel levels that could wake the dead. "Stop! You cannot do this," she shrieked at Tony, the crew foreman, who paused mid-swing with his sledgehammer. "This is a violation of neighborhood standards. I'm calling the homeowners association." Marcus stepped forward, his morning coffee still steaming in his hands. He had anticipated Patricia might make a scene, but he hadn't expected her to physically block construction equipment. "Patricia, you need to get off my property. The crew has work to do." "Your property?" Patricia whirled around, her bathrobe billowing dramatically. "This affects all of us. You're destroying our neighborhood's character." She pulled out her phone and began frantically dialing. "Yes, hello? I need to report a code violation in progress. Someone is illegally demolishing a pool without proper community approval." Tony looked at Marcus with the weary expression of a man who had dealt with difficult neighbors before. "Sir, we can't work with her standing there. It's a safety hazard." What Marcus didn't know was that Patricia had spent the previous evening preparing for this moment. She had researched every possible legal angle, called 3 different city departments, and even contacted a local news reporter who specialized in neighborhood disputes. In her mind, she wasn't just saving a pool, she was defending democracy itself. Within an hour, Patricia's phone calls had borne fruit. A city code enforcement officer named Dave Matthews arrived in a white pickup truck, clipboard in hand, and a distinctly annoyed expression on his weathered face. This was his 3rd call of the week involving Patricia Williamson, and it wasn't even Wednesday yet. "What seems to be the problem here?" Dave asked, though he already knew the answer. Patricia had left him 4 voicemails before 8 a.m. Finally, Patricia rushed toward him like he was her personal savior. "Officer Matthews, this man is destroying valuable neighborhood infrastructure without proper permits or community input." I demand you shut this operation down immediately. Dave examined Marcus's paperwork with the thoroughness of someone who had learned not to take Patricia's word for anything. The permits were in order, the inspections were scheduled, and everything was completely legal. He had seen this dance before. Mrs. Williamson, Dave said slowly, Mr. Chen has all the required permits. This is his private property, and he has every right to remove his pool. Patricia's face turned 3 shades of red. But what about the environmental impact, the property values, the community standards? None of those are city code violations, ma'am. That's when Patricia played her ace card. She pulled out a thick folder labeled HOA violations and thrust it at Dave. I am the president of the Maple Grove Homeowners Association, and our covenants clearly state that major property modifications require board approval. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He had completely forgotten about the HOA. When he inherited the house, he had been so focused on repairs and moving logistics that he hadn't paid attention to homeowner association rules. Patricia's triumphant smile suggested she knew she had found his weakness. Is this true, Mr. Chen? Dave asked. Did you get HOA approval? I didn't think I needed it for removing something that's broken, Marcus stammered. Patricia sensed victory. Our neighborhood covenant specifically requires approval for any modifications that affect community aesthetics and property values. Pool removal clearly falls under this category. Dave sighed deeply. He couldn't enforce HOA rules. That was a civil matter. But he couldn't ignore them either if they were legitimate. Mr. Chen, you'll need to resolve this with your homeowners association before proceeding. Tony, you'll need to stop work until this gets sorted out. As the demolition crew packed up their equipment, Patricia practically glowed with satisfaction. She had won the first battle, but Marcus was already planning his counterattack. What Patricia didn't realize was that her victory celebration was premature, and that her role as HOA president was about to come under very intense scrutiny. This isn't over, Marcus said quietly as Patricia strutted back to her house. You're absolutely right, Patricia called over her shoulder. It's just beginning. Neither of them could have predicted just how right she was. Marcus Chen spent the next 3 days doing something Patricia Williamson had clearly never bothered to do, actually reading the Maple Grove Homeowners Association documents. What he discovered in those tedious legal pages would have made a lawyer smile and a fraud investigator salivate. The first red flag was Patricia's claim to be a HOA president. According to the association bylaws, presidents were elected annually by neighborhood vote. The last recorded election was 3 years ago, and Patricia had lost. Badly. The actual president was supposed to be Jim Rodriguez, who lived 2 streets over and had been trying to resign for months because nobody attended the meetings. The second red flag was bigger. Patricia had been signing official HOA correspondence and making decisions without any board authority for over 2 years. She had effectively been running a one-person dictatorship while everyone else ignored HOA business entirely. Marcus called Jim Rodriguez that Wednesday evening. Jim answered on the first ring, sounding exhausted before the conversation even began. Oh God, what did Patricia do now? Jim asked when Marcus introduced himself. You know about her activities? Know about them? I've been getting complaints about her for months. She sends violation notices to people for parking their cars in their own driveways. She fined the Hendersons $50 for planting roses without architectural approval. Last month, she tried to ban children from playing in their own front yards because it was disruptive to neighborhood tranquility. Marcus felt a spark of hope. Jim, I need to ask you something important. As the actual HOA president, do I need board approval to remove my pool? There was a long pause. Marcus, I've been trying to dissolve this whole HOA for 2 years. Half the neighborhood wants out, but Patricia keeps interfering with the paperwork. And no, you absolutely do not need approval to remove a broken pool from your own backyard. Patricia made that up. Thursday morning, Marcus armed himself with documentation and called Dave Matthews at Code Enforcement. Dave listened to Marcus's findings with growing interest and growing annoyance. So you're telling me Mrs. Williamson has been impersonating an HOA officer? Dave asked. For over 2 years, according to the real president. And she's been issuing fake violation notices and collecting fines. Jim Rodriguez has a whole file of complaints about it. Dave was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed from weary bureaucrat to interested investigator. Mr. Chen, I think we need to have a conversation with Mrs. Williamson. Are you available tomorrow morning? Friday arrived with Patricia in full battle mode. She had spent the week preparing what she called her final presentation to shut down Marcus's pool removal permanently. She had contacted a local TV news reporter, printed dozens of flyers about property value protection, and even recruited her sister Karen, yes, actually named Karen, to help her stage what she called a peaceful demonstration. At 9 a.m. sharp, Patricia marched across the street to Marcus's house, wearing her neighborhood watch captain shirt and carrying a megaphone she had borrowed from her daughter's cheerleading squad. Behind her followed her sister Karen, two confused elderly neighbors who thought they were signing a petition to fix potholes, and a bored-looking news reporter who was clearly questioning his life choices. Marcus Chen, Patricia announced through the megaphone, her voice echoing off every house on the block. As president of the Maple Grove Homeowners Association, I am here to serve you with an official cease and desist order. That's when Dave Matthews pulled up in his city truck, followed by a police cruiser that made Patricia's triumphant expression falter slightly. Officer Jennifer Walsh stepped out of the patrol car with the measured movements of someone who had dealt with neighborhood disputes before, but never quite like this one. Dave had briefed her on the situation, and she had reviewed the complaint files. What she found was a pattern of harassment, impersonation of authority, and possible fraud that went far beyond a simple pool removal dispute. "Mrs. Williamson," Officer Walsh called out, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of actual law enforcement. "I need to speak with you." Patricia lowered her megaphone, suddenly aware that this wasn't going according to her script. The news reporter perked up. This was getting interesting. "Officer, I'm glad you're here." Patricia recovered quickly, switching to her sweetest voice. "I've been trying to stop an illegal pool removal that's destroying our neighborhood." "Ma'am, I'm not here about the pool," Officer Walsh replied. "I'm here about reports of impersonation and harassment. I need you to step away from Mr. Chen's property immediately." The confused elderly neighbors began backing away. Patricia's sister Karen whispered urgently, "Pat, maybe we should go home." But Patricia, drunk on months of unchallenged authority and convinced of her own righteousness, made the mistake that would define the rest of this story. "Officer, you don't understand," she insisted, stepping closer instead of backing away. "I am the Homeowners Association president. I have authority here." Officer Walsh exchanged a look with Dave Matthews, who held up the real HO documentation Marcus had provided. "Mrs. Williamson," Officer Walsh said slowly, "you are not the HOA president. You haven't been for 3 years, and you're about to be under arrest." What happened next would be replayed on local news for weeks and become the stuff of Maple Grove neighborhood legend. Patricia Williamson's face went through a spectacular range of emotions in the span of 3 seconds: confusion, denial, rage, and finally complete meltdown. The megaphone slipped from her hands and hit the pavement with a plastic crack that seemed to echo her crumbling authority. "That's impossible," she shrieked, her voice reaching frequencies that made dogs bark 3 streets away. "I've been president for years. I have the files. I have the authority. You can't arrest me for doing my job." Officer Walsh remained perfectly calm, which only made Patricia's hysteria more pronounced by contrast. "Ma'am, impersonating an official position, harassment, and fraudulent collection of fees are serious charges. You need to calm down and step away from Mr. Chen's property." But Patricia was beyond reason. In her mind, this was all an elaborate conspiracy against her righteous mission to protect the neighborhood. She pointed an accusatory finger at Marcus, who was watching the scene unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and disbelief. "This is his fault," Patricia screamed. "He's turned you against me. He's destroying our community. I won't let him get away with this." And then Patricia made the second catastrophic mistake of the morning. She charged toward Marcus's front door, apparently intending to force her way into his house to find evidence of whatever conspiracy she had convinced herself was happening. Officer Walsh moved with the swift efficiency of someone trained for exactly this situation. Patricia found herself face down on Marcus's front lawn, hands zip-tied behind her back, while her sister Karen wept into her hands and the news reporter frantically scribbled notes. "Patricia Williamson, you're under arrest for harassment, impersonation of authority, trespassing, and attempted breaking and entering," Officer Walsh announced in a voice that carried to every neighbor who had gathered to watch the spectacle. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The woman who had spent years terrorizing her neighbors with fake authority was being arrested by real authority, on the lawn of the man she tried to bully into submission. Dave Matthews approached Marcus with Patricia's confiscated folder of HOA violations. Inside were dozens of fake violation notices, forged documents, and receipts for fees Patricia had collected from neighbors who didn't know any better. The evidence of her fraudulent operation was overwhelming. "Mr. Chen," Dave said, "you're free to resume your pool demolition. All permits are valid and there are no legal obstacles. Mrs. Williamson had no authority to stop you." As Officer Walsh loaded Patricia into the patrol car, Patricia made one final desperate attempt to salvage her narrative. "You'll see," she yelled through the car window. "When your property values crash, you'll see I was right. This neighborhood will thank me someday." The news reporter approached Marcus for a comment. Marcus, still processing the surreal morning, gave what would become the most quoted line of the entire saga. "I just wanted to remove a broken pool. I never expected to uncover a neighborhood crime spree." The reporter turned to Jim Rodriguez, who had arrived just in time to witness Patricia's arrest. As the actual HOA president, what's your response to this situation? Jim's answer was perfect. Effective immediately, I'm dissolving the Maple Grove Homeowners Association. We're all adults here. We don't need someone else telling us how to live in our own homes. The crowd of neighbors burst into spontaneous applause. By noon, Patricia's fake HOA kingdom had crumbled completely. Dave Matthews had contacted every neighbor who had received her fake violation notices, informing them that any fees they had paid were obtained fraudulently. Several neighbors came forward with their own Patricia horror stories, fake noise complaints, bogus architectural violations, and threats about non-existent neighborhood rules. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman Patricia had fined for planting roses, summed up the community's feeling best. "I always wondered why that woman thought she was in charge of everything. Turns out she wasn't in charge of anything." The demolition crew returned that afternoon to complete their work. As the sledgehammers resumed their rhythm against the pool's concrete walls, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months: peace. The sound of destruction had never been so satisfying. From her holding cell at the county jail, Patricia could probably hear the distant echoes of her final defeat. Her pool preservation campaign had not only failed spectacularly, it had exposed her as a fraud and ended her reign of neighborhood terror forever. But the story wasn't quite over yet. Patricia's arrest was just the beginning of consequences that would reshape Maple Grove in ways no one had anticipated. 6 months later, Marcus Chen stood in his backyard admiring the beautiful vegetable garden that now occupied the space where his uncle's crumbling pool used to be. Tomatoes climbed neat trellises, herbs flourished in raised beds, and a small greenhouse sat where the broken pool equipment had once rusted. The transformation was so complete that new visitors to the neighborhood couldn't imagine there had ever been a pool there at all. The same couldn't be said for Patricia Williamson's transformation. Patricia had spent 3 days in county jail before her sister Karen posted bail. The charges against her were substantial: harassment, impersonation of authority, fraud, attempted breaking and entering, and violation of multiple restraining orders that neighbors had filed over the years. Her court date was set for the following month, and her lawyer had already advised her that a plea deal was her best option. But Patricia's legal troubles were just the beginning of her comeuppance. The local news story about the fake HOA president had gone viral, reaching far beyond Maple Grove. The video of Patricia's meltdown and arrest had been viewed over 2 million times, spawning memes, reaction videos, and even a remix of her screaming, "I am the Homeowners Association president," set to dubstep music. Patricia had become internet famous for all the wrong reasons. The financial consequences were equally devastating. Every neighbor who had paid Patricia's fake fines demanded refunds, totaling over $3,000. The city had imposed hefty penalties for her fraudulent activities. Her homeowner's insurance dropped her after the harassment claims. Worst of all, the negative publicity had forced her to put her perfectly manicured house on the market, ironically destroying the very property values she had claimed to protect. Marcus watched through his kitchen window as the sold sign went up in Patricia's front yard. The new owners were a young couple with twin toddlers who had bought the house specifically because the neighborhood had no HOA restrictions. They had already planted wildflowers in the front yard, something Patricia would have called a violation in her reign of terror. The ripple effects of Patricia's downfall had transformed the entire neighborhood in unexpected ways. Without the fear of fake HOA retaliation, residents began expressing their individuality. The Hendersons expanded their rose garden. The Johnsons painted their front door bright blue. Kids played freely in front yards without worrying about noise violations. The neighborhood had become more colorful, more alive, and infinitely more peaceful. Jim Rodriguez had kept his promise to dissolve the HOA, and the legal paperwork was finally complete. At the dissolution celebration, held, fittingly, in Marcus's backyard, neighbors shared their own Patricia stories with a mixture of relief and dark humor. "She once told me I couldn't park my own car in my own driveway because it was aesthetically disruptive," laughed Mrs. Peterson. "She fined me $25 for leaving my garbage cans out past noon," added Tom Wilson. "I thought it was legitimate because she had official-looking letterhead." Dave Matthews from Code Enforcement had become something of a neighborhood hero. His thorough investigation had uncovered Patricia's fraudulent operation and prevented her from victimizing anyone else. At the dissolution party, he shared the most shocking revelation of all. "We investigated Patricia's activities going back 5 years," Dave announced to the gathered neighbors. "She collected over $15,000 in fake HOA fees and fines. Some of you were paying her monthly dues for an association that didn't legally exist." The crowd's gasps turned to nervous laughter as people realized how completely they had been fooled. Marcus raised his glass of lemonade, made from lemons grown in his new garden. Here's to learning that sometimes the best way to deal with a bully is to simply check the paperwork. The toast was interrupted by a familiar sound. Construction equipment. The new owners of Patricia's house were having their own pool installed. a decision that would have sent the old Patricia into apoplectic rage. The irony was delicious. As the sun set over Maple Grove, Marcus reflected on the bizarre journey that had started with a simple home improvement project and ended with exposing a neighborhood fraud. His uncle's broken pool was gone, but in its place he had gained something much more valuable, a peaceful community where neighbors could live without fear of arbitrary rules and fake authority. The final twist came a week later when Marcus received a letter forwarded from Patricia's new address. Inside was a single sentence written in Patricia's distinctive handwriting. "You were right about the pool." Marcus smiled, folded the letter, and tossed it in his compost bin, right next to the spot where Patricia's reign of terror had finally ended. Some stories, he mused, have the most satisfying endings when the villains finally admit defeat. The pool was gone, the neighborhood was free, and Marcus Chen had learned that sometimes the best defense against a Karen is simply knowing the wall better than she does. The end.